Hello, there we go, that works. I'm just wondering if I actually need to hold the microphone. Can you hear me if I talk without the microphone? No? Okay. I'll talk with the microphone, so my name is Laura Czajkowski, and I'm the Senior Developer Community Manager at Couchbase. And so tonight I'm going to talk to you about cultivating a community through events. So my job as a community manager is to work and sponsor a number of different events out there. And over the last 4 years, I've sponsored about 80 different trade shows globally, just me. And I'm not in marketing, I'm in engineering or product management. So I'm basically going to talk you through from my point of view how I end up reviewing conferences, the tools and techniques that I use to make decisions. And I work predominantly in the open source and developer industry. So there's many people like me that have to review different people's events. And I'm going to be giving you some ideas of what we look at and how we review them. And basically from top to bottom, from start to execution and completion, and give you an idea of what we were doing. So without further ado. So have you ever wondered, obviously, what it takes to complete an event? So from my point of view, they're not just as simple as turning up and talking at a booth, which is what some people seem to think that's actually the case. So it takes a lot of behind the scenes preparation to go from finding out about a cool conference, and there's so many of them out there, to basically arrive on the day and execute it and get people involved. How we end up working with is working with different stakeholders, from regional managers, developer advocates, community members. And basically, on any given day of the week, I get at least one, if not two, proposals to sponsor an event. Last month alone, even in the quietest month in December, I got 10 requests for sponsorships. So when you have to choose which event to sponsor, you have to come up with sets of criteria. You have to figure out how you make that choice for you to sponsor that event. So at the end of the day, you've got to show value for where your budget is actually going. So the problems we face and challenges, there are so many events, and life is not black and white, and neither is choosing the events. So when you first start to look at the events, you just realize how many of them are there. There's a number of different franchises of events. When you start looking at the language types of events, and when I say languages, I mean like Java, Python, .NET, and each of those may have different number of regional events. So even in London, you might, for example, have a number of different Python events. And which one is the one that you're to go to over which one you don't go to? And it gets very complicated. So what I started to do was looking at creating an event strategy and a plan to execute that. So I just want to talk you through from my personal point of view how I've worked reviewing them, collecting them information, talking with the various stakeholders. And so I'm a global community manager. I'm based over here in the UK. I work remotely, I work from home, and we have offices all over the world. And that means I also have to work with people from all over the world. So when I make a decision over here in my house, I have to explain that decision to somebody in Seattle or somebody in Spain. And they may not always agree with my decision, but if I have showed them how I've come to that conclusion, how I've made that decision, it tends to get a bit of better buy-in, and they understand how these decisions are made, because we're all trying to get in front of our community. We're just coming at it from different angles. So you do get a lot of pushback in my industry because, again, there are so many types of events that we can go out there. On any given day of the week, even in London tonight, you can go to 20 or 30 different meetups. When you think about that from an event point of view, there are so many conferences out there that we can sponsor. We don't have unlimited budgets. Unless you're the likes of the big corporations like a Google or an Intel or an IBM or a Cisco and Oracle. Those are huge companies that have massive budgets that can do numerous events a month or a day of the week. They also have massive teams. I go back to, there's one of me, 5 developer advocates that I work with, and we are one team within our organization that run about 20 to 30 trade shows a year, plus our meetups and plus speaking at conferences. So we need to be quite strategic on what we choose. So I do a lot of homework, and I start this process back during the summer, and officially then come October, I sit down and make this decision. So when I first joined back in 2014, we didn't do any trade shows. And I'm using that word specifically, they're trade shows, they're like events. They're anywhere we can go talk to a person, they paid for a ticket, you might get a lead scan. And we're not a lead gen team, we look at that as a conversational point of view. So now we do 30 of these events a year. So the requests came in from everywhere, internally, externally, from former employees to current community members. The request was endless. And we had to sit down and try to figure out which ones should I sponsor? I should just point out really carefully and quickly that events that make it really, really difficult for me to buy in are lack of event date on a website. And this seems really simple, but I guarantee you, if you look at your favorite event out there or just search for your next event that you're going to take part in, they may not have the event location, they may not have the event date, and they want you to commit to these events. My biggest pet peeve at the moment is this new trend, which basically makes me sign in and complete a form to have a callback to sponsor an event. I hate that. Absolutely hate it. And the reason I do is, again, I don't want to have to deal with 30 or 60 different conversations a month to have a conversation about an event to sponsor. I just want to be able to review the prospectus, have all that information in there for me to make that decision. If I have follow-up questions, trust me, I'm going to ask them. I just don't need to be spammed afterwards going, hey, here's our next event, here's our next event. I don't want to have that conversation. So when I go back to our conference strategy, there was no way for me to kind of convey my thoughts to people very easily or very coherently without having the same conversation again and again and again. So again, I discussed this with many other developer managers or community managers out there, and we're like, well, what do you guys do? So we looked at creating a conference playbook. So this is where I defined my strategy. This is where I defined my goals and my objectives. We ended up involving the extended stakeholders. We involved the core team, who that core team was. Is it me? Is it the developer advocates? Is it the regional manager that wants to benefit and grow the number of community activities in his region? And we defined the purpose of it. So again, by involving everybody in the conversation, there was no reason for them not to know what was actually happening in their back garden. And this actually led to better buy-in and stops having like negative impact. So we looked at a conference event strategy. What did you actually want to get from it? So again, when there's so many events out there, what do you actually want to get from them? Because you can do every event if you have an unlimited budget, or you can say, this is my budget for the year, I'm going to do these next 10 events. But if you don't have anything to measure that outcome by, what do you define your success? So is it at least, for me, it was at least one blog post written. Is it at least one conversation with a community member? Have I found my next community champion? Like, what was my goals for each event? And if I can measure that outcome after every single event, at the end of the year, I can show how I've grown my community, how I've done it through events that way, which is quite an unusual way of looking at it as well. I appreciate it's not everybody's way of looking at it, but I wanted to show that as a community manager, I can spend X amount of budget and talk to a number of people, but here's what I wanted to achieve by doing that. So now that you've been chosen, I had to convey that to a lot of people and how the success was being measured. So once these have been decided on the events that satisfy your conference, you go back to your playbook and your metrics. We reach out to the vendors. We work with the right option, because again, what was really interesting to people at the time was they said, well, that isn't within my budget. But I realized that actually if you have the conversation with vendors, you can say, well, hey, you know, I don't have enough money to sponsor that event, but here is my budget. Is there some way, shape or form that we can have a discussion about sponsoring the event? And actually that was a key to actually opening up different avenues for us to get in front of a different audience. For each event that you've chosen, ask yourself every single time, why are you taking part in the event, what you want to walk away from the event, and what you will need to do to create and develop a successful outcome for this event. Nobody likes housekeeping, but in this case, I really do. I'm slightly OCD about it. And I want to tell you about one of the tools that made my life so much more simpler. This is a tool called Evman. It's a free tool to use. If you go to evman.io on a website, you can log in with any of these one sign-in policies. It's written by the developers from OpenShift and Red Hat, and it's made our lives so much simpler. And I say this because I can do magic stuff like this. So on any given time, and I'm just putting in last year's calendar, I can see all the green dots are ones that we've confirmed to take part in. There's usually a yellow dot in the middle, and that means I've got a CFP deadline that I'm actually submitting my conference talks to. So again, our job is not just to sponsor events. We also want to get in front of developers. Just like tonight, we go out and we talk about the different languages, so I can help track if there's a deadline coming up that we need to submit an abstract to. And I track this on the main page. And again, I can see all the different deadlines that are coming up, which are tracked events, which are committed to events, and I can break it down by region and territory. It's a really useful tool. It's made our life simple. I can also build on it, look on metrics, and I can check which talks were accepted, which talks had a higher acceptance rate, which developer advocates submitted the most talks, which one got accepted the most, and then we can see which talks are having a better acceptance rate. So this just gives us a better idea of how we're doing as a team, and also where we are on crazy months like conference season. So for us, in tech industry and in developer communities, it's September and October, a little bit in November, February, March, April, May, and June. Don't come near us. That is our crazy, crazy time of the year. So it means we also can't take, hello, yes?
Hello, sorry. Can you tag people in it?
Pardon?
Can you tag people in your calendar?
Well, yes, so yeah, you can actually tag people. I don't think I can show this here, but basically, if I go into an event, like if I went into DevOps UK, I could see which members of team members are actually taking part in it, so I can see that I'm the team lead, because these are all going against my name. So I can track a global picture. So I can track all of these. These are all going against me. And that means that I can see where everybody needs to be. So when I go for scheduling and I look at May, I can see what kind of event we're doing, so I can create the event type. So if it's a meetup, if it's a conference, if it's just speaking, or if it's a booth, I then can look at booth, right? So during booth time, we've got 2 events in London on the same week. Let's pull my hair out, shall we? But it helps me plan actually where people need to be at any given time. It made our lives a lot better, and it was one less relying on spreadsheets. It's our favorite tool, and it's free. This then basically buys into how we worked on our event strategy. And on our event strategy, we have a weekly meeting or bi-weekly meeting, depending on how busy the event is going to be. Or we put all this information in the one document, and we basically, again, work with the different stakeholders. So it's not just the developer advocate that's taking part in it. If we're working with a salesperson in the region, or a pre-sales person, or a community member, all of the information is in one place. And obviously, like many conference organizers do give you all this information, but the problem with the way they do it is they give you document upon document and make you join multiple different calls. So we did like AWS is a good example. They're really good at conveying all the information you need, and they have many, many calls up to the point of doing reInvent. And you could actually watch all the different slide decks. There's about 12 different presentations. I'm not going to get my team to watch 12 different presentations. So what I do is I create this event logistics and strategy document. I put all that information in one page that they can find and where they need to be. Execution. I mean, no great event actually, runs smoothly. You'd hope it would, but you've got to allow for plan Bs. And so we try and put all the information and get everybody involved ahead of time. So sometimes you're dealing with people who've never done booth duty before, or they've never gone to a conference. And we do find that at times when people have just joined their careers. So we try to make them understand our job versus what they're expecting. And we get them to understand our job is to explain to people and talk to people about the technology and maybe possibly do a demonstration. Their job is to start selling to people, because they're not going to a booth to be sold. They're coming to be educated. So we work on how to understand and get them to understand what they're meant to be doing on the day. So I am very cruel, and I make people do a walkthrough on the morning. And I found this to be really, really useful, if only for the fact that some people sometimes fly on the day of the event or the morning of the event. And we have found that if you take weather or life, sometimes these things just don't work out very well. So having everything the day beforehand, and I have made people come in for a 6 o'clock in the morning briefing, because sometimes we're on the booth at 8 a.m. to actually be making things run a lot smoother. It also means that if we do have any issues, if we don't have a staff person there, or if something has happened, we can actually rejig the situation. Only this year, actually, at one of my events, 2 of the guys didn't turn up, and I was like, but you accepted the invitation. And they're like, oh, I thought it was in the wrong time zone. So it was like 4 hours later. I'm like, no, if it was 4 hours later, you would have missed the event. So again, it just helps us plan these situations. And I might point out, he had been on those briefing calls as well, but it just hadn't dawned on him to change his time zone. So during the event, hope you've done all your prep work, things have gone really smoothly, or if it doesn't run smoothly, you have that plan B, you have the separate clicker in the bag, you've got your batteries, you've got your demo. you have your schedule. And the reason we've started using a schedule actually more so than any other time is because sometimes when we're on booth duty, it could be a 3 or 4 day event. We're also speaking at the same time, so we're running from booths back to give a presentation to tell people to come back to our booth. But also, if we've got different people from different types of areas of expertise at an event, we want to make sure they get a bit of a break as well. And that was something that we didn't do 2 years ago that we've started to introduce last year and now really enforce a schedule, just because it helps make things a bit smoother in the end. So this is something that I learned earlier on, is that how our event runs actually influences our future event strategies. And I say that because how I look at last year's events determine if I do them this year or not. And if I look back at the last 3 years of events, there's definitely events that we will do again and again and again, because working with the event organizers is very good. There's a good relationship there. They haven't overly spammed me. They've communicated well. And the events have gone very smoothly, or they've just been a really good event. One thing I would say after every single event is to do a detailed post-mortem, which sounds a bit macabre, but actually you need to be honest about it. If we decide that we were told that an event would have 4,000 attendees, when we got there was only 2,000 attendees and 500 free passes, then you feel kind of cheated for what you've been told and what you've been sold. So just try and be honest with the people that are sponsoring your events. Just be honest about the fact that actually you don't know the final numbers, or when you do though know the numbers, be transparent about you were expecting X number of people, they didn't attend, this is the reasons why, or this is what we want to do next year to change that, because you've made a decision based on what you were told. You've then spent your budget based on those information. And I think that's often the hardest bit to get buy-in the following year if an event hasn't been as much of a success outside of everything that you've done when you've been working with different stakeholders. So what we've started doing is creating a debrief room each event, and in that tracks all the information of the event. So again, we don't track a lead scan from our point of view, but sales and marketing do want to know that information. Sometimes we set a goal, we have a bit of fun with it. How many demos we do, how many conversations we had, what the event was all about, because we know that if we're not there tomorrow morning or in 6 months' time or years down the line, that if somebody wants to make a decision how this event went, they can go back and look at this. So this debrief actually lives in Salesforce because we're working with the different teams that use those tools. So we're trying to work with everybody to make sure that the information is out there. Obviously, we email people afterwards, but email gets lost. Salesforce is kind of like is the holy grail of if it's in there that the truth has happened. And that means then the sales and the marketing team can run reports on it. So again, we're trying to use the tools that they use so that they can understand how our events are successful or not. This is just a little checklist, which again communicates the whole time how we do things. So we send the debrief to our team, to the different stakeholders. We send it to an internal site. Right now, we've just moved off of Yammer to Slack. So now we post them into all, so the entire company gets a debrief. And it was really interesting. So last week, we did an event called Code Mash, and it's in Ohio. And somebody came past our booth, and they were in Domino's Pizza. And so we were having this discussion, because it was in the debrief going, Domino's Pizza came by. And the next minute, for the next 4.5 hours on our internal Slack channel, is we're all discussing our pizza toppings. So it now meant that people are starting to read our debriefs as well. So it's not just 6 people reading our debriefs, it's more people in the company are reading our debriefs. That means we have more information in there that people will find useful. So we start tracking like product information or feedback from a person. We start tracking the kind of conversations we had. What did they like about the demo? What could we improve upon the demo? And again, it just means that more people get to understand your work that you do, because we're remote, we're based all over the world, and so is our company, but this makes them feel more part of the family and more involved in the community as well. So what I've been very successful with in trying to figure that out is then my job is to get involved with the community. So we've seen an increase in our community engagement post-event because people have been able to talk to us at the booth, figure out what we're doing, and then engage with us afterwards because we've sent up follow-up emails. We can see an increase in our activity from like our community writing program. So we've talked to people at the event. They say they're using Couchbase. That's great. I say I run a community writing program. For every blog I publish, I pay them $200 a blog post written. They didn't know about that. After the event, I get submissions of content. So again, I've been able to like understand how my community is doing things. We found really good community champions and experts. So perhaps they're one of the developers in an organization that's using us, but they're actually doing other different projects. And so they want to file more bugs, or they want to get involved in the forums. So we found new members of our champions in our community. So these are my discoveries. So after over 70, almost 80 trade shows in 4.5 years, be very, very strict on your criteria. Avoid being asked to do one more event, because that one more event will actually break you or break your team. And we have done that one more event, and we've said never again, because it was the worst event ever, because it wasn't planned. It didn't meet any of our criteria, but we were kind of like, well, you should do it. So that's been my strictest one. Decide ahead of time, improve success. I usually start by October. This year was a little bit later, it was by November. It just helps get everything on board so that by January, then everything is locked in for the year. We put everything then into our Evman tool. That also helps us plan our lives, because we'd like some downtime too. If I go back to May was busy. And we all have lives, we want to have some downtime and plan our families and plan our vacations. So for us to see a bigger picture, it's been really useful. It's still evolving, and we're adding it each more content every year. So if I look at our debrief from last year to this year, it has changed. Now we're tracking number of conversations, a number of demos. That's something we weren't doing 2 years ago. One very successful thing that we've done is work with our partner team, our business development team. And because they've got partners that want to work with us, and we want to work with them, and actually by involving them in this process, that's been really good from our conversational point of view. And it's actually helped us give a better understanding of where our community is. So we've known that other events, while they're very successful, may not be where our community is. That may be great for the sales and marketing team, so we hand that event over to them. And now we focus on other events, so that's given us a better understanding of where things are. So that's me. Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay.
So I'm talking into this microphone that's being recorded. I was wondering how you go about actually driving people to come to your booth. Because obviously at a lot of big conferences, there's lots of different companies wanting to talk to the same people. So what do you kind of do to try and entice people to come to your event?
So I'll just repeat that. So the question was, how do I entice people to my booth ahead of time? So that's a really good question. So we work with the sales team and the BDR team. We put the event online on our events page. We have sometimes done blog posts ahead of time to drive people to our booth. We don't know if that's as successful because sometimes the team might blog where they're going to be that month. We have done very well if the event is in our territory, in our region, that we can get access to ahead of time, and sometimes they will give you a list of attendees. We can email them. So some events that we have done have these magical portals where you can actually book meetings with people. So you're registered, you've attended, and you're going to the event, and you can mark yourself as a sponsor. And then sometimes they say, people are looking for meetings. There's a couple of events that start doing that over in Eastern Europe. It's a very, very popular way of doing it. I don't see that as much over North America, and I definitely don't see it over here in UK or Ireland, to be honest. So in those cases, you know, we reach out, we say, hey, we're going to be at this event. Are any of your team going to be at the event? Because we do know based on previous years. So if I look at an event that we've done in the past, perhaps like one of the Java events, we have those attendees in Salesforce. We go back and look at the debrief because it's there, and we can reach out to all the people in the list going, hey, are you going to this event this year? We're going to be there again. Would you like to schedule a meeting? So again, it goes back to if everything is in Salesforce and our debrief and the event history is there, then we can actually have a better understanding of how much of a follow-up we should actually engage with. Hello?
So a lot of the bigger conferences have their own app.
Mm-hmm.
Do you use those? Like, have you found which ones are good? Or are they useful for booking meetings and finding people to bring to your stand? Or?
So I've not found an app that's been brilliant, to be fair, for any conference. And the fact that every single event has their own app makes it really difficult to kind of like quantify how good it actually is. One of the more better ones that I found was the Grace Hopper event last year. So for people who don't know about that, it's the largest conference in the world for women in tech. 23,000 attendees, 22,500 attendees are women. brilliant. It's held this year in Orlando. So last year the event, the tool that they used was the mobile app. And in there you booked every single session that you wanted to go to. And that gave you your schedule, and you could see it was very heavily engaged in gamification, so you could understand who was sharing on social media, but then you could also reach out to them that way and leave them a message. So that was quite useful. So again, if you did feel that there was somebody with a great talk and you wanted to reach out to them, you could message them through the application. So that was quite interesting. But I don't really have a favorite app, to be fair. Yep.
Hi, I'm sort of intrigued. My role is really similar to yours, but I sit within marketing, and for me it's from a lead gen perspective. So I'm sort of intrigued, do you have an events marketer who you work with? Because I think your angle and approach to it and my angle, they really complement each other and they could really add value for one another.
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
So this year we actually created a core event strategy team because what we realized was that I do 30 trade shows. Other teams may do less than that or more than that, plus their own type of events, executive dinners or more kind of CIO events.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have a big picture of what was happening. So again, if I go back to May, if May is our team that way, we're needing to pull into resources from other teams. We don't have the big picture of it. So we started to look at ways that we could communicate better. Excuse me. And so, yes, there are other versions of me in marketing, usually by regions and territory. So North America has East, West, and Central. So there's 3 of them, again, to 1 of me. And EMEA then has 2. So there's 5 of them and 1 of me. So I have to do less. That's why I get kind of strict with my strategy. They have a lot more fluidity and they don't have to plan out a year in advance. They're very much focused by quarterly basis and work with the sales and marketing teams on a more quarterly basis for changing their strategy. Some of the events that we do for conferences, you do need to lock in like 12 months in advance or 10 months out for us to get the right booth space, the right location. So we don't have that opportunity of in 2 months' time we're going to do that event over there because that's just not possible from our point of view.
Did you come first or did the lead gen?
We've always been separate. We used to be in engineering, so they've always been kept separate, and most community managers in developer world tend to not want to be in marketing because it goes back to developers not wanting to be marketed to. So we have a different strategy. Even our messaging is completely different.
That makes sense.
It's a bit different. It does lead to kind of headaches at times. I have to explain why I'm not sponsoring an event, so I go back to my conference playbook, and that's actually cleared things a lot up, actually, to be fair. Anything else? Great. Well, thank you very much for having me tonight. Thank you. I really appreciate it.